There's been some ideas that have been going through my head since this whole war in Ukraine thing started. Some things that were definitely being left out by the mainstream media. One of those things is that I did want to talk about was essentially the removal of RT from Europe. That means not even anybody in. You can't see it on YouTube if you're in the European Union and some other European countries. You can't get the channel anymore because it's Russian propaganda, etc. But I have to note that the coverage of it on RT wasn't what I was expecting. It wasn't all rah rah, sis boom bah, go Putin. A lot of it was very sympathetic towards the Ukrainians who are getting bombed, etc. Now, I suppose that could just be a propaganda move, try to, soften the blow kind of thing. But it's not really what I expected. I expected more of a hardcore debunk the West's statements, push Russia's narrative kind of thing. That's not what it is. So they went in a direction that I didn't expect. Well, maybe I should have expected it. I don't know. Now, something else I wanted to talk about was how they say this started when Putin ordered the war machine in. Except that's kind of not true. It started when Ukraine started shelling Donbass. And when they started doing that, Russia recognized the independence of Donbass and Lugansk. And then moved in there to defend them. I'm not taking sides in the issue. I'm just giving you particular context that's being left out of the mainstream discussion. Now, I've said previously, I would support Russia going in and backing up Donbass and Lugansk because they did freely and fairly vote to leave Ukraine. And Russia, I think, can be there to assist them if they request it, which I'm assuming they did. But the actual invading of the whole of Ukraine itself, I think it's been a mistake. I don't think this is going to play out the way Putin thinks it will. I think this is one of the very, very few times Putin's actually made a mistake, because he's been able to be pretty calculating and very smart in pulling off basically everything. I think that he really screwed up on this, because there really wasn't any war propaganda put out. I mean, there was a Russian viewpoint, but it didn't manifest itself the same way that it normally would in the West, where it's justification, and even when that justification is disproven, justification. And I think that speaks a lot to why there's so many protests in Russia to the war itself. I think on the propaganda front at home, I don't think Russia did a very good job of it. And I think, in my opinion, what I think happened here was, I don't think Putin initially wanted to actually invade, because everybody was surprised by it. The U.S. was surprised by it. International analysts were surprised by it. Russia's own generals were surprised by it. None of them actually expected a full-on invasion. And from what we know, they only knew about 3 days before the invasion actually took place. The high-ranking Russian generals. I'm wondering if maybe Putin was thinking that the shelling was going to provide a pretext for going in, and maybe something that the West did deliberately in order to antagonize them, to try to set them off. In either case, Russia didn't win the propaganda war on this one. Even from countries that are normally very much allied to Russia, like Iran and China, etc., have not been the jumping on the bandwagon, cheering them on all the way. A lot of them have been calling for peace. So I don't think this was a good move. I think Putin underestimated this situation, and that's very rare to happen. But that's just my 2 cents about all that, because when they went in kind of with kid gloves. I mean, if they had gone in with the full force, not just the full force of the Russian military, but the full force of the amount of forces that they have allocated to it. As it stands right now, it's like upwards of 25% of the actual called up forces are actually in Ukraine right now. There's a very large reserve, and they're not pushing as hard as they could. And we've seen that with many of the difficulties taking places that were more difficult than you would have thought. And I think that's largely due to Russia not throwing all in on this. Now, there could be any number of reasons. Maybe they were trying to make it as easy on the civilian population as possible. Maybe they had a whole ton of forces kept in reserve in case of a counter invasion from or through another NATO country. I mean, who knows? I mean, who really knows what's going on in Putin's head right now? But I think this was definitely a mistake. And I think that if Russia actually manages to lose the war, which I don't think is likely, this would be devastating. It would probably be the end of Putin right there. So for his sake, he better have really calculated this a lot better than it appears to be, because right now it's looking like he didn't do very well at all, and is probably in a lot of trouble right now. And this war is coming out more difficult than he had actually intended. And I think that's going to make things very difficult for him. And I think a lot of the worst is probably yet to come in this situation.
Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.